You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim. Welcome to our special coverage of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis. Around $14 billion over 3 years have been pledged by governments, businesses and philanthropists. Most of that money is destined for the African continent, where millions of people have died from these epidemics. Now, the two-day conference in the French city of Lyon has wrapped up, and this year an unprecedented number of countries from Africa have answered the call to fight AIDS, malaria and TB. 23 African nations pledged tens of millions of dollars to the Global Fund, of which Nigeria, Tanzania, the DR Congo, Mozambique and Zimbabwe are set to be the biggest recipients. France 24's Julia Seeger has more from Lyon.
It's an immense victory for the Global Fund, for Emmanuel Macron, but more importantly for the millions of people out there who are suffering from one of these diseases, namely HIV, AIDS, malaria, and TB. The French president has announced that he's reached the goal of $14 billion, but that more efforts will be done in the coming weeks. Bono and Bill Gates from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have vowed to raise another $100 million. Now, France has increased its contribution by 20% and has pledged $1.4 billion altogether. Now, 92% of this entire budget will be sent to programs in Africa. Several countries have indeed witnessed a resurgence of one of these diseases. And earlier I spoke to the head of the WHO, who told me that one of the main issues on the ground today is access to essential global health services.
50% of the world's population doesn't have access to essential health services, and 100 million people are descending into poverty because of out-of-pocket payment. So strengthening the health system, providing services and pushing for universal health coverage will help us to achieve also the eradication or elimination of diseases.
Now, tuberculosis is the world's deadliest infectious disease, ranking above HIV/AIDS. According to the World Health Organization, it claimed 1.7 million lives in 2017, and a quarter of those deaths occurred in Africa. Our next guest is one of the faces of the Global Fund's initiative. Solela Sifumbe is a doctor from South Africa who contracted multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis. Take a listen.
TB is seen to be a dirty disease that can only infect a certain kind of person. But the truth is that anyone can get TB. And the only thing that makes us susceptible to TB is the fact that we breathe. So that is the message that I'm pushing forward. The fact that TB is all of our problem because we all breathe.
Well, Dr. Sifumbi joins us now on the program. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us tonight. Now, you contracted a strain of TB that can't be cured by the two strongest anti-TB drugs. Can you tell us how that happened and what impact it's had on your life?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me on the show. So I was a medical student at the time. And yes, I was diagnosed with multi-drug resistant TB, which was likely, I likely contracted it due to the people that are in the hospitals of the wards that we work in. But anyway, I discovered a lump on my neck and I went to get it investigated, and it turned out it was MDR, which was a very shocking diagnosis. But I later learned that actually as healthcare workers, we're up to 6 times at more risk than the general population of contracting MDR, in fact.
And tell us more about what kind of impact it had on a day-to-day level. I mean, you felt sick, I imagine. Were you able to carry out your profession? Were you able to treat people whilst being sick with TB?
It was a very difficult time, to be honest. The treatment takes a daily toll on you. So it's antibiotics. So basically, you're feeling nauseous, you're vomiting, you're having diarrhea, you're having joint pain, all sorts of things. So I wasn't actually able to continue with my studies. So I stopped my studies. And then it's also the fear of the long-term side effects. So your hearing loss, your kidney damage, your liver damage, those things. So actually it was quite a scary time because I was afraid of dying of TB, but then I was also afraid of the side effects of the drugs, which can be quite toxic.
Now, you've experienced the disease both as a doctor and as a patient. Tell us more about your experience of TB treatment. What was lacking? What needed to be improved?
So something that is definitely lacking in general, globally, in terms of TB treatment is that people aren't being supported through treatment. Not much is being done to evaluate these patients' psychological statuses. And depression is actually a common side effect of some of the drugs. So a lot of people drop into depression and will actually stop taking the treatment because they're not feeling well. So the message that I'm pushing across is that it doesn't matter. We can spend billions on drugs, but if we're not actually helping people to take the drugs and complete the treatment period, then we're doing nothing.
Okay, so Sifumbe, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on tonight's program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Africa is the continent most affected by HIV/AIDS, but according to the UN, the number of AIDS-related deaths and new infections have declined steadily in the past decade. In South Africa, 14% of its population lives with the disease, but recent years have seen huge strides in patient care and with treatment more accessible than ever before. This report by Caroline Dumais and Stefan Carstens.
At the heart of Alexandra, one of Johannesburg's poorest districts, you'll find ATMs like none you've seen before. These machines don't dispense cash, but medication. Here, 80% of the machine users are HIV positive. They come every month to pick up their antiretrovirals. Josephine explains how she now avoids queuing, as going to the clinic meant waiting for hours on end to be served.
So this place is very good because you just came anytime and you get your medication, 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you go out. So it's a good idea.
And if Josephine needs to ask a question, the device lets her speak to an online pharmacist who is based in a national call center. It's a feat of technology and logistics that can handle 100,000 prescriptions a month. The system is available in 5 sites, and its creator is already talking about the pharmacy of the future.
The service is a professional service because we maintain the dispensing record, what you needed. We've got your cell phone number. If you're not collecting, we ask you why. We follow up, automated SMS system, doing everything to make the patient compliant.
It's a pilot project that the Ministry of Health intends to extend because of the challenge it faces in distributing the drugs to fight AIDS. In South Africa, more than 4.5 million people are being treated.
So with that large number of patients, we need to find innovations that we can afford, that make sense to the patients and also decreases the load on health facilities.
By 2020, 6 million HIV-positive South Africans will be treated. Automizing the dispensing of medications could be vital.
Well, our next guest is the technical director of the Major Pandemics Unit at Expertise France, Eric Fleutelot. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Now, a lot of the data suggests that the cases of HIV/AIDS are actually on the decline. UNAIDS said 42% of cases from 2010 to 2017 in Eastern and Southern Africa are going down, 24% in West and Central Africa. Are we getting closer, rather, to the eradication of HIV and AIDS on the continent?
Definitely, we have made a lot of progress, and it's extremely impressive. Less people are dying from AIDS, and we have less new infection than before. But out of 39 million people living with HIV, only around 20 million of them have access to the life-saving treatment, meaning that the others, if they are not treated right now, they are going to be sick and they are going to die from AIDS. So it's very urgent that we need to do something, and for that we know exactly what to do. We need money to test more people and to put them on treatment and to make sure that the treatment is successful.
Now, we were just looking at that report earlier from South Africa. This is very rare, actually, isn't it? I mean, you're not getting that kind of access to treatment in other parts of the continent.
It's a fact that what they have been able to do in South Africa cannot yet be replicated to many other African countries. Though it's a very good source of inspiration, it shows that we have innovative ways to lighten the burden at hospital level, especially in places where we have a lot of people living with HIV. But what I would like to add is that the next challenge is to make sure that all people with HIV have access to treatment in remote areas, in rural areas. It has been quite easy to do it in capital cities, for example. And we at Expertise France, what we are doing is to help, to support countries enhance their HIV program, including in rural areas where the rural population is living.
Just very quickly, what are some of the main challenges for people needing access to treatment in rural areas?
I mean, care centers, health facilities are too far from where the population are living. You know, usually what we say is that, oh yes, the population is living too far from health services. I would prefer to say that health services are too far from the population, and it's a big difference. So we have to innovate. Maybe we need more mobile unit to deliver testing, access to treatment, and also lab facilities. It has been experience already, and it works perfectly. We have to make sure that in a village where only 60 people are living, we are able to provide them with the needed services for HIV, but also for TB and for malaria.
Now, the Global Fund says $14 billion will save 16 million lives between 2021 and 2023. Do you think that goal is achievable?
Yeah, it's definitely achievable, and you know, I mean, it's a huge amount of money, but if it's used to save 16 million people, especially most of them, are in sub-Saharan Africa, I think we can do it. The only thing is that money alone won't be enough. We need more technical assistance, and that's what France has decided to provide to many, many countries. We provide them with technical assistance, and that's what Expertise France, the French Technical Cooperation Agency, is doing. We are helping them to improve the supply chain, for example, in countries. So we are sure that all patients have access to the needed treatment. That's a little bit more complicated. It's quite easy to raise money. It has been a big challenge today. It's a successful challenge achievement today. But now we have to deliver, and to deliver that, there's a need for technical assistance, and that's what we are going to do.
And finally, just very quickly, do you think the creation of the Global Fund, this huge international organization that essentially is a funding mechanism for fighting these diseases, does that really actually just point to a failure of individual governments and states to protect their own people from these diseases?
The three diseases, malaria, TB, and HIV, they are global pandemic. They are global health issues. So the need for a global answer was obvious, and that's Kofi Annan 19 years ago, who decided to support the creation of the Global Fund. And you see the impact now. The impact is extremely impressive. In total, from the beginning, 32 million people have been saved thanks to the support of the Global Fund. It's not a failure of government. It's a support for government. It's a support for national programs. That's extremely helpful, and actually, it's now a source of inspiration for some other health issues.
Okay, well, Eric Flutulu, thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Now, malaria has killed over 400,000 people in 2017. Over 90% of the deaths occurred in Africa. Over 200 million Africans suffer from the disease, which kills one child globally every 2 minutes. Well, in Burkina Faso, one company has found a radical new way to fight malaria. It's released thousands of genetically sterilized mosquitoes to get rid of the species carrying the disease. Nicolas Jamin has the story.
It's in this laboratory in Burkina Faso that the genetically modified mosquitoes are prepared. The males are sterilized and then let loose in the wild. They mate with the female mosquitoes, who are the ones that transmit malaria, but then there will be no offspring. Later, during the second phase of the experiment, the male ones will be fertile but modified so that the offspring will all be male. This private firm explained why it launched the project.
The conventional tools we use today have reached their limit. They cannot be more efficient than they are now. So we have to look at new methods, and that is why we are using genetically modified mosquitoes.
5,000 genetically modified mosquitoes have already been let loose in this village, and some farmers are backing the experience. But this method has sparked controversy in Burkina Faso. There have been street protests, and this environmentalist is very concerned.
Imagine if these modified mosquitoes spread viruses, which under normal circumstances they would not be able to harbour. Then an entire population would be decimated.
Others are waiting to see if the experience is efficient or not. Currently, malaria kills 400,000 people every year on the African continent.
Well, that wraps up our special coverage. There's more world news coming up. Stay tuned to France 24.